Hello, artists. Today we are going to be starting our unit on self-portraits. I'd like you to participate in some bell work first before we start. I'd like for you to think about 3 reasons why an artist might make a self-portrait. Then I'd like you to ask yourself, when you make a self-portrait, what are 2 things you'd want the viewer to know about you? You have 2 minutes to go ahead and complete this. Okay, you have about 1 more minute left. If you've already finished, you can go ahead and get out the materials. The materials we need today are 2 blank sheets of drawing paper or copy paper. You need a pencil, and then you're also going to need some type of reference image of yourself. So it might be a mirror that you're using, might be your phone, a picture of yourself on your phone, or it might be a printed out piece of paper. All right, so your 2 minutes are up. Hopefully you've gotten the answers to those questions because we are going to come back to them in a moment. Our objective for today is to practice the appropriate facial proportions. We're doing this so that eventually you can successfully create your own self-portrait. You'll know you've successfully mastered today's objective when you practice drawing ahead with the guidelines for the eyes, the lips, the ears, and the nose. So let's first ask ourselves, what is a self-portrait? And I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to think about what you think a self-portrait might be. All right, so hopefully you've gotten some type of answer to this question. Now, the correct definition of a self-portrait is an artwork of yourself. So it could be a painting, a drawing, a digital image, but it is a self-portrait. So it's yourself. Portrait is an artwork of anybody else. So a portrait would be your friend, your family member, whereas a self-portrait would just be of you. Now, another question we need to ask ourselves is why would an artist draw a self portrait? So, why would you feel the need to draw yourself? Because there's pictures and there's mirrors. You can see yourself all the time. So, think about why an artist would draw a self portrait. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to go ahead and do that as well. All right, so let's ask ourselves, why would an artist draw a self-portrait? Now, there are a bunch of different answers that you could have possibly come up with, but the three main ones that I think are important to think about is one of them is to improve our skills at drawing faces in general. So, one skill to learn when you are becoming an artist is self portraits. And the reason it's so important is because everything in the world is shapes. That's how we draw. We draw through shapes. And so on our on our faces, there are a lot of shapes that we can learn how to draw. And proportions are really important when you're drawing a self portrait. So it helps us learn the relationship between two different objects. Another reason why self portraits are important to draw is to look at a person in real life rather than in a photo. So you're able to look at a mirror or a photograph or some type of image of a person so that way you can look at yourself and think about, okay, my eyes are almond shaped and my nose is a little bit turned up. So that way you can spend the time looking at these different shapes and getting an understanding of what the shapes on your face as well as anybody's face look like. And then the third one is just to document yourselves. So you're all in middle school. Now you're going to go from one grade to the next. You're going to go to high school. And so if you continue to draw self portraits, you're not only going to be able to see your skills improve, but you're going to be able to document yourselves and things that you're interested in, things that you like. Because self portraits are not just drawing your your face and your eyes and your nose. It's also about yourself. So you have to think about, what do I want the viewer to see when I draw a self portrait? So, our first part in drawing self portraits is facial proportions. So, a proportion is the relationship in size and placement between one object and another. So, if we are thinking about the relationship, so a relationship might be your family members, your aunts, your uncles, you have a different place where you might be closer to your mother, your father, whereas you might be a little bit less close to your uncle and your aunt. So today we're going to determine the relationship between your eyes, your nose, your ears, and your lips as it relates to the head of our portrait. So if you think about it that way, we're just looking at relationships between different objects. So the materials you're going to need today to practice are 2 sheets of drawing paper. You can use the front and the back um, if you do not have the means to 2 different sheets. You need a pencil, and then you are going to need some type of reference image. So it could be a mirror, a photograph of yourself on your phone, or printed on a piece of paper.
Okay, so when we start drawing a self portrait, the very first thing that we need is to draw our head. Now, something important to know about your shape of your head is that typically our head is the shape of an upside down egg. So if you think about the egg, the bottom of the egg is a lot bigger than the top. So typically eggs will look something like this. But for us, our brains are a lot bigger than our mouths, believe it or not. So our faces are actually upside down. So a lot of the time, my students will try to press down really hard on their paper and they might not be able to get it right. They might draw an oval. They might draw something that doesn't really resemble a face. And that's because, first of all, most of the time we really psych ourselves out by trying to get it perfect the first time. The other thing is pressing down, it makes it a lot harder to erase your mistakes rather than something else where it's drawn a lot lighter. So for our first activity, what we're going to do is spend about a minute just drawing egg shapes. Now, something I'd like you to do, and this is a trick to making sure that you draw a little bit lighter than you normally do. If you hold your pencil like this, I'm gonna want you to pull back just a little bit. That way you can't have as much control as you normally would, and so you're gonna be able to draw a lot lighter. So what I'd like you to do is just draw some quick sort of egg shapes all over your paper. They can be small, they can be big, they can overlap. but what you're focusing on is trying to draw an egg shape. Now, I'd like these to be as light as you possibly can get them, making sure that you're not spending a lot of time focusing on if it's perfect or not, because what we're doing when we begin drawing our self-portraits is we're just giving ourselves a little bit of a guideline, and we're going to draw very lightly. So once we know where everything goes, and we've decided this is where our proportions go, we're going to then go back over our light lines and draw them a little darker, more confidently.
So I'm going to give you about 1 minute to go ahead and practice as quickly as you can just some upside down egg shapes. Now make sure when you're drawing your upside down egg shapes, draw lightly and draw quickly. Don't focus on it being perfect, just trying to focus on the motions of your hand and trying to get down the best egg shape you can possibly get.
So once we've practiced these upside down egg shapes, we're going to go ahead and think about what we think our best egg shape was. So I'm going to go ahead and star this one. I think I did the best one, and that was actually my first one, I believe. So hopefully this kind of loosened you up a little bit. So now what we're going to do is follow along with me. We're actually going to make a guideline and sort of a map, so that way we can go back and look at it when we begin our final portrait. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna think about how big I want my portrait to be. I'd like it to fill most of the paper, and I know that my head needs to be the main focus. So I'm gonna think about, I probably want my head to be somewhere between these 4 guidelines. Now obviously we're going to do an egg shape, so it could be a little bit bigger, it could be a little bit smaller, but I like to stay within these guidelines. And I'm going to go ahead and draw that upside down egg shape. Make sure those lines are super light. And that's my first part. So now what I'm going to do is find out where my eyes should go, my ears, my lips, my nose, all of those things that you're going to see on a traditional face. So the first thing we're going to do is find where our eye line is. Now, a lot of people sometimes think that our eyes are way up here, when really they're right in the middle of our face. So if you don't believe me, put your hand on the top of your head and your hand on your chin. Go ahead and slowly bring them together. Your hands are going to meet at your eyes, and so that's what we're going to do. Put our hand at the top of our head, the other hand at our chin, and we're going to slowly meet somewhere in the middle. We're going to go ahead and draw a really light line right there. And I'd like you to go ahead and draw an arrow and put where it says eyes. Okay, so now you should have your upside down egg shape, your face, and then also your eye line. So next we're going to go ahead and do the nose. The nose is halfway between the eyes and the chin. So I'm going to put my finger where I just drew my eye line. I'm going to put another finger at my chin, and I'm going to go ahead and meet right in the middle. And that's where my nose is going to go. So you're going to draw a light line just like I did earlier. And I want you to draw an arrow, and I want you to label it nose. Okay, so now we're going to find out where our lips are. Now, we have been doing halfway, but if you think about it, you have a small gap between your nose and your lips, that little cleft right there, the little divot in your nose, or the little divot in between where your nose and your lips are. So they're not exactly halfway. So I am gonna find halfway between my nose and my chin. I'm gonna go ahead and meet at the middle. So it's right about here. And I'm just gonna go up just a little bit. And that's where my lips are gonna be. And so I'm going to draw my arrow, labeling it so I know. Now, let's say you mess up. You're drawing lightly, so if you don't think that your proportions are where they're supposed to be, then you can go ahead and erase and start over. You can start over as many times as you want because you're drawing lightly. You're not putting a lot of pressure on your paper, so you're gonna be able to erase those lines and nobody's even gonna know. So next we're gonna go ahead and figure out where our ears are gonna go. Now this is really simple because you've already done your eye line. Your eyes and your ears are on the same sort of plane. So I'm just going to put an arrow right here. I'm gonna put ears because our ears are gonna be very close to where our eyes are. Now we're going to find where the center of our face is. So just like we've done for the eyes and the nose, we're going to put our finger where we think our ears are gonna go, and then our finger where our other ear is gonna go. We're gonna slowly meet at the middle, and this is where our middle is gonna be. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw a really light line, like that. Then you're gonna go ahead and find out where your eyes are gonna go. So our eyes have several different parts. We're just gonna find out where the really center of our eye is. That's the pupil, that's the dark part of your eye. So I'm going to go ahead and put my hand in the center of my face, my hand on one of my ears, and I'm gonna meet at the middle again. And this is where my pupil's gonna be. I'm gonna do the same thing right here. Now we're going to find out where our neck is going to be. So our neck actually comes from behind our ears. So it goes down. You don't want your neck to be too long or too short. You want it to kind of be about half of a finger width or length of space. And then we can draw our shoulders. They don't go much farther than the head or else you'll look like the Hulk. And then we can kind of give ourselves a neckline, so a collar or some type of thing. Okay, so once you're done, it should look something like this. This is going to be kind of a map for you to look back to when you start to do your final sketch or your final self-portrait. So that way you can go and look and make sure that you have everything where it needs to be. It's kind of like a roadmap for you. Now, one more thing before I move on is I do want to talk about profiles and different directions that you might want to draw a picture of. Now, for our self-portrait, we're going to do it facing forward, but I do want to talk to you about what it might look like if you're turned to the side, for example. So if you are turned to the side, you're going to want to make sure that you turn your oval to the side as well. So you're going to want to slant it, for example. And this may not look correct, but when you think about your face being in one direction, you're going to go ahead and make that middle line in that same direction. So it's pointing that way. So we know our face is going to be pointing that way as well. And then you can kind of think about where your eyes might be, your nose, your mouth. Same thing with the other side. You can just do the same exact thing. Now you can do this for any really direction, so looking up, down. It takes a lot of practice. Make sure that you are always looking at a reference photo because that is the most important thing when it comes to creating a self-portrait.